After some thought, I realized that just presenting a questionnaire for download simply isn't enough. As a teacher, I learned that one of the critical ways to ensure that a particular bit of information sticks in the minds of a student is to present that information in as many different forms as possible. So now you've got something to read, and you also have an audio-visual presentation that will hopefully help you to better remember and apply the questions on this form, and also to start you thinking about ways in which you can personalize it for the use of your particular set of players. Bear in mind, this questionnaire, as it's presently formulated, is for your use only. It deals with extremely personal information, some of which might be too embarrassing or awkward to ask your players directly. I've provided it to you in an editable format, though, so that you can adjust the questions to make them more publicly presentable to the sensibilities of your players, or to allow you to make any other adjustments that you deem necessary. Remember, though, one very critical point before you begin: you are on the players' side. Seriously, you're the greatest ally your players and their characters have. The reason you do all those dastardly GMery deeds, including collecting the information on this questionnaire, isn't because you're out to get them. No, perish the thought. It's because you want to help them tell a fantastic story. And what's a great story without conflict, adversity, and danger? So, all those times you're challenging them, endangering their characters, pushing their comfort zones right up to the limits, and maybe just a little bit beyond, you're actually doing it because you're their friend. And sometimes friendship hurts. So, all of the information on this questionnaire, all of that is so that you can help them achieve the best possible satisfaction out of the game. After all, they'll be crafting characters to live, fight, and potentially die in the world that you will be crafting. And these realities have informed the creation of this list of some of the information that you should probably know, or soon get to know, about your players as you add depth to your game world. With all of that said, here's the instructions for how to use the Player Awareness Questionnaire. Remember to write out your answers on a separate sheet of paper, or separate sheets of paper, rather, so you don't feel constrained by the space limitations on the questionnaire. As you gradually learn this information, you can then get to work weaving it into the process of crafting your campaigns to be ever more personalized for your audience, your players. First off, consider names. For what is your player's name? Does that name have any special spelling or pronunciation? Does your player have a nickname? Do they like their name or nickname? And how come? What is its history? Social eating. What foods does your player like at meals? As snacks? Do they have any food allergies, or strong dislikes, or cultural taboos? For instance, you do not want to serve a surprising list of things to your Jewish or Muslim friends, and you certainly wouldn't want to serve beef to a Hindu. How picky is the player with their food? And does your player have any unpleasant habits while eating? What can be done to politely mitigate those habits? How physically fit is the player? Do they exercise? Would they like to? How satisfied is the player with their appearance and state of fitness? What sports do they like or play? What sort of self-defense style do they prefer, which can include guns, by the way? What do they know about actual combat? About various athletics, including parkour? What kinds of injuries or handicaps have they suffered, including surgeries and congenital problems? Do they want any sort of accommodation so that they can more easily make it to your games? What physical feat that they have accomplished makes your player the most proud? What is your player's level of education? How proud are they of what they've accomplished? If they've got a degree, do they use it much? What does the player do for a living? What sorts of skills does that job entail? Does the player enjoy the job? Are they looking for a different sort of work? What sort of self-education does the player do? And what are their hobbies? Well, besides role-playing, of course. What sorts of things really frighten your player? What sort of grief or trauma have they endured, or are afraid of having to endure? What anxieties trouble the player? What can make the player cry? When was the last time the player did cry? When they are alone, and sure nobody's around and watching, what makes the player sneak a peek over their shoulder? What bugs your player? These are sometimes called pet peeves, though I've never really liked that term myself. This is the only question in this category, because most people have a significant list of little things that annoy them, at least a little, but which don't usually make or break a relationship with someone else. Usually. Knowing about these little quirks, like the direction in which someone puts their toilet paper, or whether they squeeze the toothpaste from the end or the middle, and how serious they are, can make getting along with someone a lot easier. Naturally, this list will probably grow a great deal over time as the player remembers little annoyances or discovers new ones. How does your player know when they have hit their psychological saturation point? In other words, what are the signs when the player knows that they have to stop and cleanse their soul? How aware is your player of these warning signs? When everything else goes wrong, what does your player like to do to recover? Does your player like to be alone or with others when they need to recharge their psychosocial batteries? In other words, are they an introvert or an extrovert? When is the reverse true, where the player just needs to be around others or just needs to be alone? When is it appropriate to hug your player? What sort of music, games, film, television, books, plays, museums, art exhibits, sports events, or other diversions does the player like or love? What can make the player nerd out or enter full fangasm mode? How cultured is the player? How cultured does the player consider themselves to be? What sort of events would the player be willing to attend with you or the rest of your gaming group? What might keep any of your group from enjoying this sort of group activity? And once you've got all that sorted out, when can you go? What is the player's culture? Their religion or philosophy? How important is that religion or philosophy to the player? Is it different from others in the local community? How many children are in your player's family? Where did the player fall in the birth order? What is the player's relationship with each of the player's siblings? What about with the player's parents or extended family? What complications has the player had with family, which can include divorces or adoption? What sorts of pets or other animals do they like? What is their current pet, if any? What is your player's romantic type? Is your player married or hoping for it? Do they have any kids? Do we need a babysitter to play, or should we all adjust the content of the game for the little ones? What is your player's ultimate goal? What do they want to do with their life? Have they already achieved that goal, or are they still en route? What about lesser goals on the way to that ultimate one? What absolutely silly goals does the player have, which they know are impossible, but kind of want to do anyway? What does the player expect to do after retirement? Have they thought about growing old? And if so, what do they plan to do when they hit their senior years? What can you or your other players do to help the player in achieving these goals, even the impossible ones? Ah, that one thing. What should your player's friends never, ever, ever say or do, or it will end the friendship? Because of how important this question is, it is left by itself for deep consideration. Here's the miscellaneous stuff. When is your player's birthday? What is their stance on gift giving or receiving? What's your player's favorite color? Is your player a night owl, a morning person, or lark, or more of the crepuscular sort? What is the player's single most embarrassing memory? What tics or quirks does the player have that haven't been addressed elsewhere? What is the one thing your player wants you to know and remember about them? Naturally, keeping lists like J. Edgar Hoover's surveillance files or the emergency plans of Batman for taking out his fellow superheroes might seem a bit creepy or nosy. All the same, most people do keep lists like this, but keep them imperfectly in their heads. Ideally, you should be able to photographically remember all of this essential stuff for instant and ready recall at any given moment. Realistically, you probably won't be able to do so unless you're one of those magnificent social geniuses that do sometimes occur. Hence, I recommend keeping notes on your players based upon this questionnaires guidelines, but with only one purpose. You want to better help them enjoy the games you run. With this goal in mind, the more ways in which you keep track of your knowledge about them, the more likely you are to remember important details when you are called into the clinch. Since most people tend to want others to know about them, using the above questionnaire as a model for one to share with your players, leaving out the questions that you intend to fill in yourself, and adjusting the ones you do put on your own player questionnaire to suit your game-specific needs, can give you a serious head start in getting to know the people with whom you will be playing. If you do ask your players to fill out such a questionnaire, however, you should probably take the time to fill out a similar one for yourself, so as to give your players the same sort of information about you that you expect from them. You're already in a slightly unequal power relationship as it is, so there's no need to throw it completely out of whack. And remember, this also serves as a template for stuff that they'll eventually want to know about their characters as well. In fact, you might consider having them fill out 2 of these questionnaires, one for the real person and the other for their character in your campaign world. Naturally, of course, there will almost certainly need to be some modifications for each of these 2 questionnaires. Friends, such as you should be to your players, and ideally they should be to each other, should know stuff like this as a matter of course. Over time, you should need to refer to your notes less and less, because your players will be more to you than just an audience. They will be people, about whom you care as though they were family. As you learn about your players, you should, more than anything else, seek to establish a real-life setting in which you all feel comfortable, sharing even the most intimate facts about your lives, loves, losses, and dreams. An emotional space where you all share in a relationship of trust and know that you can rely on each other, at least within the bounds of your gaming group. Once you have the sort of social environment where you can communicate openly with each other, then you are truly ready to start preparing a game that will make everyone happy. In the meantime, though, just try to have fun. The rest should come naturally. Hopefully at least some of this was useful to you, and if it was, please hit the like and subscribe buttons at your leisure. Also, please feel free to download and modify the OpenOffice documents I've uploaded and linked below to your heart's content. It's there to be used and to give you a starting point for your own personalized questionnaires. And with all of that said, and all of that done, I wish you all the very best.